Damage caused by bears. The damage caused by bears is currently causing a stir. Not only are they destroying crops, but there are also daily reports of people being attacked. The reason why there is more damage from bears than usual this year seems to be that the extreme heat wave has caused a devastating loss of nuts. I have also heard that more people are complaining to local governments about the culling of bears. From the perspective of those who have actually suffered bear damage, extermination seems inevitable, while from an animal protection standpoint, filing complaints is understandable. Every time I hear such stories, it makes me realize how difficult coexistence with wild animals truly is. Having said that, I would like to share the personal experience of a man who lost his best friend to a bear nearly 30 years ago. It came as a surprise when my college friend Takita suddenly told me he was considering early retirement and moving to Hokkaido permanently. He had a decent job at a well-known company, held a decent position, and lived a decent life. I kept using the word decent, but there was no doubt that his standard of living was above average, even if it didn't quite reach the level of the elite. In other words, he was above middle class but below upper class. He was the most successful person among my peers, and from my perspective, I envied him, so I repeatedly used the term decent with a touch of jealousy. That's why I couldn't find a reason for him to retire early and leave the company. The company is also strongly urging him to stay. I traveled to Hokkaido the year before last and last year. That's what got me hooked on Hokkaido. Plus, I'm single, right? I thought a self-sufficient lifestyle might be nice. When I said, "You're not at an age where you should be thinking about early retirement," he replied that as a single man, he had nothing to hold him back. He doesn't dislike his job, but he doesn't want to be bound by human relationships and other constraints for the next few decades, according to Takita. Well, that makes sense. I can understand that. At the time, I strongly opposed it, but in the end, he didn't accept it. But looking back now, I think the fact that Takita's parents had passed away one after another the previous year also had an impact. Takita once tearfully confided in me while drinking. He was prone to crying, but he seemed to truly appreciate that his parents, despite not being wealthy, had worked tirelessly to send him to university. That's why I know Takita cherished his parents. He often invited them to meals or took them on trips. He would say that he owed his ability to live a life above average to his parents. Looking back, I feel that the loss of his beloved parents must have left him feeling as though a string had snapped, causing him to lose his motivation for work. About half a year after that conversation, I received a New Year's card from him the following year. It featured a photo of Takata against a backdrop of snow-covered landscapes, accompanied by the message, "Hokkaido is the best, come visit." The next time I saw Takita was nearly 2 years later. As summer was coming to an end, I received a complaint call from Takita saying, "I told you to come visit, but you never came." With my new business venture finally settling down and a week-long vacation available, I decided to take him up on his invitation. The Takata I met after 2 years had shed his stylish, hard-working image from his days in Tokyo and now resembled Goro from the northern region. When I pointed this out, he laughed and said, "We're pretty similar, after all." Takita lives in F City, about a 2-hour drive from Sapporo. If I mention that it was the setting for a famous TV drama, you might guess where it is. When he visited there on a trip before, his parents seemed to really like the scenery, and they had decided that if they were going to settle down permanently, this was the place. He also mentioned that they had moved his parents' graves so that they could enjoy the view. Takita had built a lodge-style house that wasn't too large. It was a stylish home that blended seamlessly with the surroundings, featuring a spacious living room, bedrooms, a guest room, and a loft. There was also a wood-burning stove, which added to the cozy atmosphere. I wondered what kind of life you were leading, but you seem to be living comfortably, and I must admit I envy you. I'm free from the constraints of the city, but life here has its challenges too. We talked about such things while enjoying the ishikari hot pot he had prepared for dinner that day. Although Takeda had never cooked before, what he made was truly delicious. He generously served local sake, and it was truly a feast. The meat in the hot pot was also delicious, and when I asked what kind of meat it was, he said it was wild boar. That's right, I started hunting after I moved here. With that, he took a hunting rifle out of a locked cabinet in the back. He said he was invited by a local hunting club, but now he can hunt wild boars and deer on his own. It's good meat, isn't it? I hunted this wild boar the day before yesterday. There's plenty, so eat as much as you want. He said that and took out a generous amount of meat from the refrigerator to show us. I remember that day was a big party with drinking and eating. The next day, we went sightseeing and shopping together. This is the location for that drama. I kept saying the same thing everywhere we went, but I liked the drama, so I was able to enjoy the scenery while reminiscing about various scenes. At dinner that day, I still have a lot more to show you, but how about going to the mountains tomorrow for some exercise? Exercise? I didn't bring any climbing gear. I told you I hunt, come with me. I'll show you how cool I am, Takeda said confidently. The next morning, Takeda and I loaded our gear into a pickup truck and headed for Mount N. I thought you'd use dogs for hunting. Sometimes I do, but I mostly go alone. Takeda is committed to the style of stealth hunting, where he enters the mountains alone to search for prey. That's where you really experience the essence of hunting. Sometimes I go into the mountains with hunting club members, but as we talked about hunting, we arrived at our destination, Nishidake. In another month, this whole area will be covered in snow. Saying that, he gathered all his gear and started walking. Once they entered the mountains, Takeda's expression changed. His calm expression transformed into a sharp one, like that of a real hunter. This isn't just for fun. Their lives are at stake, so we're both desperate. When I mentioned his expression to Takeda, he replied in this way. I had thought hunting was just an extension of his hobby, but I never expected to hear from Takeda himself that it wasn't just a casual pastime. Once we entered the mountains, he grew noticeably quieter. Of course, he had to avoid letting the animals sense his presence. Following Takeda's sparse instructions, I followed him closely. After walking for about 2 hours, Takeda signaled for us to stop. It's a brown bear. Stay still. He spoke to me in a voice that was barely audible. Looking up, I saw a large black mass moving among the trees on the mountainside about 100 meters away. I was terrified at the sight of a real brown bear for the first time. It was a giant, probably about 2 meters tall. I hid in the bushes and watched the bear's movements. After watching for a while, the bear disappeared into the depths of the forest. Takeda sighed and said, "Let's head back for today. I can't risk putting you in danger, even if I were alone. I wanted to show you how I hunt deer, but maybe next time." With that, we decided to retrace our steps. On the way back, Takeda said, "That bear didn't seem to notice us. I was really scared. It was my first time seeing a bear while hunting. But we have hunting rifles, so we'll be fine even if it comes at us, right? You idiot, if you miss a bear, it's game over. Even the local hunting club warns against shooting bears carelessly. It seems that even veteran hunters often lose their lives when confronted by bears. Well, let's hurry back anyway." However, it was a deer that stopped us in our tracks as we hurried home. We spotted it alone just a short distance from the car. The deer seemed to be aware of us, raising its head and looking slightly wary. Takeda seemed to be hesitating whether to shoot or not. "Wait here. I'll take a shot," he said, then quietly moved through the bushes. The deer remained motionless. Takeda stopped walking. He loaded a bullet into the rifle slung over his shoulder, aimed, and fired. The gunshot echoed through the mountains. And at the same time, the deer collapsed to the ground. "Okay." Takeda let out a satisfied cry. I ran over to the deer with Takeda. The deer, which had been struck near the throat, was already dead. Looking at the deer, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. I felt sorry for the fact that a life had been taken right before my eyes, and at the same time, I felt a sense of guilt, as if my friend had done something wrong. "Wait here while I bleed it out and butcher it." He was skillfully handling the knife, but I couldn't bear to watch, so I waited at a distance for the work to finish. I don't know how long I waited, but when Takeda called me back, there were 3 sandbags lined up. I immediately realized that the deer was inside them. "We don't have time to butcher it properly, so we've just divided it roughly. We'll take this down the mountain. Take one with you." He handed me the lightest looking sandbag. It was heavy, but it felt indescribable. Perhaps it was the weight of a life. "Do you feel sorry for them?" Takeda suddenly asked me that. No, I don't know what to say. I felt the same way at first. But from the perspective of protecting and managing wild animals, it's definitely necessary. I may sound arrogant, but I think of it as part of my contribution to society. Someone has to do it. That doesn't mean I take the lives of wild animals lightly, though. I can't do that. Half convinced and half unconvinced by Takeda's words, we returned to the car. We finished loading the equipment and sandbags into the trunk. Just as I was about to open the passenger door and get in, following Takeda's instruction to go ahead, it happened. The bushes ahead rustled loudly. It was about 30 meters away, and I thought it might be a deer, but what appeared before my eyes was a large brown bear. The moment I saw its overwhelming presence, I felt my heart skip a beat. It turned its gaze toward us and slowly approached, step by step. Then the bear stopped walking and stared intently at us. The distance was about 20 meters, and its eyes, which gazed at us, were like black jewels, without a single cloud or trace of hostility. I had never been met with such a pure and innocent gaze before. So I felt as if I were being captivated by those eyes. Glancing sideways, I noticed that Takeda had beads of sweat running down his cheeks. He was breathing heavily, leaning his hands on the truck bed. How long had he been staring at the bear? Suddenly, the bear stood up on its hind legs and sniffed the air, looking around. Seeing the bear stand up, fear surged through him. He shifted his gaze back to Takeda, who was slowly reaching for his hunting rifle without the bear noticing. Once he had the rifle in hand, he slowly pulled a bullet from the chest pocket of his vest. Without taking his eyes off the bear, Takeda loaded a bullet into the rifle and aimed the barrel at the bear. Meanwhile, the bear had stopped sniffing around as it had been doing earlier and was now standing on its hind legs, staring intently at us. However, unlike before, there was a clear sense of hostility in its eyes. Takeda remained motionless, holding his gun steady. "All right, get into the car slowly. Don't make any noise when you close the door. Once you're safely inside, slowly open the driver's side door. If the bear approaches after you get in, don't hesitate to close the door and never open it again." Takeda gave me these instructions in a low voice, keeping his eyes on the bear. I nodded silently and slowly got into the car, being careful not to provoke the bear. After safely getting into the car, I reached for the driver's door handle. I pulled it slowly, trying not to make any noise. I slowly opened the driver's door. There was a dull metallic sound from the hinges, but I tried my best not to make any noise. The door opened halfway. Takeda took one step, then another, approaching the driver's seat from the side of the cargo bed. It was the moment Takeda reached for the door. The bear suddenly let out a loud roar. At the same time, it charged forward. I was terrified by the sight and let out a loud scream. It was a gunshot. I immediately realized that Takeda had fired right next to me. However, the bear did not stop and continued to charge toward Takeda. When the bear collided violently with the driver's seat area, the door, which had been partially open, slammed shut with a loud bang, causing the vehicle to shake violently. I could hear Takeda's screams mixed with the bear's roars. I could see the bear violently thrashing about from the driver's side window. However, I didn't have the courage to peek through the window to see what was happening or to help Takeda. In my despair, I remembered Takeda's words and closed the passenger side door. So I closed my eyes tightly, covered my ears, and hunched over. When I could no longer hear Takeda's voice faintly through my covered ears, nor the bear's roar, I cautiously peeked out the driver's side window. The ground beneath my feet was covered in blood. But Takeda was nowhere to be seen. There were traces of him being dragged toward the bushes where the bear had emerged. I could only stare blankly at the bloodstains. Then I drove the truck down to the village. I explained the situation and filed a missing person report with the police. As a result of the search conducted by the police and the local hunting association, Takeda was found in a pitiful state. The hunting association searched for the bear that had attacked Takeda, but they were unable to find it. I was told this by a member of the hunting club who had taken care of Takeda before his death. He said to run away if you see a bear, but shooting the deer along the way was a mistake. The blood scent must have drawn the bear to you. Takeda's death was an accident, don't dwell on it. Besides, if you enter the mountains with a gun, you must have been prepared for such a situation. So, thinking that you couldn't save him is nothing but arrogance. In the presence of wild animals, all humans are equally powerless. I recall these words whenever I hear reports of bear attacks. If asked whether I hate the bear that killed Takeda, the answer is no. The bear's actions were a necessity for survival, and the human actions to cull bears in response to such attacks are also a necessity. That is why I do not hate that bear, nor will I ever hate it. The only thing I can say is that I miss Takeda. My only true friend will never return. This is the end of this story. Thank you for listening to the end.